everyone, it's Anna from Fabric Dreamer. Welcome back to our Fabric Dreamer chats. We haven't had one in a little while. Today I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Huguette Montesinos out of Hawaii. She is a joy. She's an absolute joy, a colourful joy at that. She's a wife, she's a mum, she's the CEO of Dysfunction Magazine. She's a joy advocate, colour enthusiast, and she is a life and business coach, educator and speaker. So what we're going to do is we're going to chat and pick her brains, and I just can't wait for you to get some wisdom out of Huguette. Oh my gosh, welcome Huguette. It is so exciting to have you here, and I can't wait to introduce you to my friends.
Thank you, beautiful. What an honor it is to be here chatting with you today.
I have so many things to ask you, but I'm actually going to go straight in, and I would love for you to, I know that you've got so many things that you do, that you've done. Can you just tell us how you got to having Dysfunction Magazine, a little bit about that, and then what brought you into coaching women and what it is that you do?
Sure. What an easy, non-loaded question, right? So, I really have to preface everything by saying that anything and everything that I do really has a spiritual base to it. It has a spiritual foundation to it, because really it's my why, right? It's the fuel and the motor that kind of pushes and propels anything and everything that I do. And so, as we know, the why is always essential to understanding what, right? The what, and as we navigate anything. So for me, there's always been a very strong emphasis on loving God and loving people, right? And so as I love people, I've specifically felt a very strong heart and inclination towards women. Women really of all ages, but typically within my own cohort, maybe a little bit older even. And so I've always had a heart for women to feel really confident, refreshed in who they are, and affirmed in who they are. And so for years, I was always attracted to fashion and style and creativity and culture, but at the same time, also the intrinsic aspects of humanity and of being a woman, right? Our psyche, understanding how we think, how we process, how we see the world, how we feel emotionally, relationally, all of those things. But I didn't have a way of really bringing those together, right? And so I was trying to figure out what could this look like. And, one year when I was studying to finish my schooling, I would take these breaks at the magazine section at the bookstore. And I remember just sorting through magazines and being like, man, I love the substance of holding a magazine, and some of them being so intrinsically valuable, and then some of them being more superficially valuable, but nonetheless, this delicious experience. And so that's where I started to kind of dream up what my ideal magazine would look like, right? Which didn't exist at the time. And it was in that moment that I really felt God just saying, I've shown it to you because it needs to exist. And so it was like there that the deposit was really, that was the initial deposit to the movement of Dysfunction Magazine. But it was really always that. It was marrying the two worlds that I was very passionate about, where I loved women and I wanted to help women on multiple aspects of their lives. But at the same time, I'm also very inclined and very interested in the arts as a whole. And so bringing those two together came about through the magazine. And over the years of running the magazine, I also felt a necessity to connect more one-on-one, more closely, and mentor after numerous years of speaking on stages and conferences and retreats and just getting similar questions and being able to speak into people's lives, that I was like, why not do this regularly? Not wait till
it's so beautiful that you were able to do that, because usually the more sort of, I don't know how to put this, but as you grow as a stylist, or, for yourself owning a magazine or whatever, it sort of seems like you're more unattainable, and yet you are becoming more reachable for other women, which I think is so beautiful, because it's what women need. They need somebody in their circle to cheer them on, particularly in that creative space.
Oh, yeah. And one thing that I started to realize was in that, it's almost, as you said, this dynamic is really interesting, because it's like you go from being reachable to almost untouchable. But at the same time, you go from not understanding very much to understanding a lot of stuff. And so there came a point where, after understanding how to run a business, how to work with women, how to help women navigate all the fears and the anxieties and that worries that come with being a spiritual person, but also being called into into spaces that seem less spiritual or seem less substance based, I understood those struggles. And in knowing that and living that, I felt that I had to share it. It was like bursting out of me and I couldn't hold it in. So that's how that really came about as well.
And that's exactly how I found you. I actually came across you because I was working for a jewelry company in Darwin, Northern Australia. And part of my role was to go through and find pictures of influencers wearing the jewelry. And I came across your work, and you must have been wearing some of the rings, and I'd taken a screenshot to give to, put in our file for when we share it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this girl's so cool. Like, I love it. She's in Hawaii, okay? And I followed you more of from a fashion perspective. And it wasn't until how many years later, it must be 3 or 4 years later, that I was in my kitchen here in Adelaide. And I was really sort of struggling with lots of, I guess, identity stuff, or just feeling not so much struggling with identity. It was probably needing to find my path and then like catapult out of the dock, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I saw your post, and it was about God and clarity, and I'm like, what? Like, okay, intriguing even more. And that's why I just had this really strong, it was like a 5-minute download. Yes, you were doing her course, and I did it. But that's exactly what I got from you, is that colorful, creative, like I felt like I could resonate with you, but you had so much spiritual guidance to offer and practical guidance to offer, which I would love to hear about a little more. I love your fusion of faith and the wisdom and the knowledge, like head knowledge of psychology and the brain, all of those things, which I really, to be honest, I didn't know anything about. I sort of knew it existed, but I've never studied that. I love how your faith is just such a natural fusion through everything you do. Can you talk to us about your faith journey and how that plays out for you in a daily way, or your work? How does that work?
Sure. So it plays out in every way. As I shared before, it's really kind of the undercurrent or the common denominator of everything that I do. And I think that's what really gives about a sense of confidence in life. It's not so much like believing in yourself, because I think we fluctuate, from day to day, from week to week, as to whether we believe in ourselves or not, whether we think our talents are good enough or not. I think what really has built a sort of steadfast confidence in doing anything and everything that I'm going to do or have set out to do in the past has really stemmed from understanding that I'm on a divine assignment. Right. And if I'm on a divine assignment, it's not about me. There's a confidence and a rest and a lack of fear in recognizing that all I need to do is show up and do what I'm being called to do. And so I don't live based on results, which I think is one of the most fear-striking type of thoughts, where everything that you do is, what if this doesn't work out? What if people never come? What if no one signs up? What if nobody buys this? What if nobody does? Right. And there's always the what if followed by the negative stance. Whereas, I come from a place of, I already know that I'm not responsible for results. I am not even looking at numbers. I am just following a divine assignment. So therefore there is confidence in that I'm not looking for validation or any kind of approval through results or numbers that are in the aftermath of anything that I do. So in recognizing that, there really is a lot of clarity, because clarity only stems from knowing where you're going, but that where has to be defined by a why. And recently I heard it said that it was something like, if your why doesn't make you cry, then it's not big enough. Right. And so as I recognize that my why does make me cry very many times, and my why is really multifaceted, because my why is making sure that I'm speaking into the lives of women. My why is making sure that I'm living a life that in the behind the scenes reflects the kind of love that God has for me. My why is also around being able to run a business so that I can be as generous as possible with the people who don't have access to finances and to basic life resources. So when I understand those whys, those make me cry. And in essence, they propel me to do whatever it is that I need to do. But in order to also have the right clarity to carry that out daily with wisdom, with divine restraint, because you can also go crazy in that and be like, I just want to save the world and I just want to do everything, and then like lose every sense of balance. There has to be a connection with my guide. There has to be a connection with my compass to know, my North Star. And so that starts with just daily time with God every single day before I do anything else, before my baby and my husband wake up. The first thing I do is I go spend time with God. I read scripture, I journal, I mull over whatever the message is for that day, because God is so beautiful and perfect in providing me exactly what I need to know, what I need to understand for that day. And the really beautiful, refreshing thing for me, and that is that it hasn't been a religious thing. It hasn't been like, oh, I just need to build this habit, I need to have this discipline. It's been a delicious refreshment to my soul. And I've recognized and I've learned that I have this delicious God that loves me, that loves every single one of us, and wants us to deliciously enjoy those gifts that he's deposited and help us navigate them so that we can successfully carry those out in our divine assignment. And I think the disconnect a lot of times, we think, oh, there's God, there's like all this stuff I have to do and can't do, and then there's like freedom on this side. But the freedom, quote unquote, on this side is totally aimless and directionless. And so when we can understand that God designed those gifts and he designed those things that we are naturally inclined to, so you can get closer to them, kind of like he attracted us to food and to sex. It's because there's no other way we would go to those things unless they were pleasurable, right? So in the same way, our gifts, our talents, they're gifts from him. And so in recognize, okay, now how do I navigate those? Where do I go with it? Who do I talk to? What project do I do? Do I do this? Do I not do that? It just keeps me from going crazy, from overextending myself, and from not really valuing and enjoying the present moment in all its fullness. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. And I can hear, when I first started your course, I sort of had those same little fleeting thoughts of like, oh, like, but I can't, I'm too exhausted. And I know that there would be so many mothers, particularly with young children, watching this going, cool, but also like, how? So like, to get the ball rolling, how do you, I know that you spend a lot of time, you've got your beautiful journaling method. What would a really simple start, like a starter's kit for carving out some time every day, what would you say to somebody that might be watching going, I don't even know how I would do that?
Sure. So what I would say is simplicity is connected to knowing yourself. And the reason we often overcomplicate is because we try to do it the way somebody else would. Even our idea of happiness, right, is a lot of times framed on what we think happiness is based on what we see others do or what we hear others say. And so the basis of simplicity is recognizing what is delicious to me, right? And so it's recognizing I need to carve out a container, which is a time frame, a location, an ambiance, right? So the container that's going to hold the substance, right? So there's the form, and then there's the substance. Now the substance is, I want to have this spirit time in the morning. I want to connect with God. I want to journal. I want to know myself, whatever that is. So you have to have both. You have to have a form and you have to have the substance. So in recognizing that personally, I'm not someone that sticks to something I don't like. I have to build deliciousness around it to be consistent with it. I had to know myself. And so in that, I had to experiment a little bit at first, because I only thought, well, I might do this, but it didn't work out. So I tried something different, etc. So I would say, give yourself a short period of adaptation and assimilation to really experiment with what is it that delicious means to you. So what is that container going to look like? Does that mean staying at home? Does that mean going to the coffee shop? Does that mean going to the park, somewhere outdoors where I can feel more inspired, more connected, etc.? Recognizing, what does that mean for me? Do I have to have a hot drink, a cold drink? Do I have to have something in my tummy? So just the tangible, objective parts of that are very essential. And then recognizing, do I like reading? Do I like journaling? Do I like, what is it that I connect with when I feel soothed, whenever I feel like I'm really learning or consuming something that's nurturing my soul? What form does that usually take? And so recognizing those things and setting the time, the place, and the elements that you want for that. Now, as far as that morning time that I have, now it's expanded over time, but initially it was like 5 minutes, then it went to like 10, 15, 20. Now it's like an hour, hour and a half, but it just flies by. So what I would say is just carve out whatever little bit of time you have. But I think realistically, the first thing that I would actually encourage anyone to do is to take a little time audit of their life for like 1 to 3 days. And just recognize, and that's, I mean, even if we look at our phones, right, like how much screen time we have on there, what I would recommend for anyone is to really take a good look and a good audit at where their time is going throughout their day, whether they're a parent, a busy entrepreneur, whatever it is, and they're going to find those little pockets of time, and they're going to recognize, more importantly, that rather than needing to sleep in the morning, they can sleep in on the front end rather than the back end, which means the night before. So if we plan out a little bit in the night before and say, you know what, I'm going to go to bed an extra 10, 20 minutes earlier so I can actually have this time that's going to just bloom and just explode my life throughout the day that's coming, I'm going to make that sacrifice. I'm going to make that space because I really want my day to have focus, to have reason, to have a why, and to just be delicious. And so why not start there?
Beautiful. Love that. I've been experimenting myself with, it was working really well for a little while, and then the kids would hear me creep through the house, and suddenly their body clocks adjusted to like when I was, and I'm going, this is not how, and you know, it's tempting to get into the control mindset and go, and then the disappointment, and it's sort of, I've had to really be very flexible with how it's going to work and if it works that day. And I want to ask you, I would love to hear some stories about the women that you've coached, and a few stories for us. Like, what does it look like for somebody to come through, have sort of, you know, if you get, tussle them around a bit and send them on their way? Like, what is that? Yeah, I'd love to hear some stories.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, the stories range so vastly because there are women that come in with absolutely no spiritual background. There are some women that have some form of spirituality, and then there are some women that are fully immersed in some kind of spiritual life. So that really ranges, and that creates the vast diversity in the types of stories and testimonies that they have, but also just the way in which I coach each person. They're really, I mean, I have a general blueprint for how I like to do things and how I run the program, but really the mentorship and the coaching part is really individual, and it's very customized to each person. And because I've walked through so many different phases of life, so many different seasons, so many different thought patterns, and even different phases of spirituality, from nothing to other forms to where I'm at now, I really understand those different aspects. So really the journey is very, it's almost what I call this, like a condemnation-free zone. It's a very guilt-free space where you can be 100% honest and vulnerable and understand that we're all swimming in this ocean of grace. And so the first thing I try to teach and really get most women to understand is that most of what they've believed over the years that has kept them stuck, that has kept them in fear-based mentality, is this perspective matrix that they've lived in. And so specifically around fear and shame of having to perform, of having to be perfect, of having to have all these ducks in a row, typically coming from previous generations and different generational needs, right? We're in a very different dynamic today. It's more existential versus our parents and grandparents were more, we just need to survive and put food on the table, right? And so there are very different interests. And so in that, it's recognizing, okay, well, if I understand that I'm performance-based and that it's all been around this idea, this false idea that this is how we all are and how we should be, and somehow I fall short, then once we deconstruct that, then all of a sudden you step into a place of absolute freedom. Now you step into the playing ground. Now you step into the place where you could say, we're going to get some work done. We're going to change some things. We're going to switch some price tags. We're going to change some identity schedules here. And so everything starts to take on a whole new color, a whole new deliciousness. And you start swimming in this ocean of grace, which is the way I like to look at it. There have been women that have birthed programs, right? Like coaching programs. There are women that have birthed clothing lines and stores, and or they've developed more so other parts and other categories of their businesses. So perhaps they were just kind of starting to dabble in something. And I've even had women that have had businesses for a long time, but they completely pivoted because they just recognized so much more about themselves. They're like, why have I been playing so small for such a long time? Also women who were just doing way too much and feeling way overextended. So I've had to, kind of bring it in and say, okay, well, why are you feeling so overextended? Are you even enjoying this? Are you even like feeling like this is a delicious life? Even though you're accomplishing things and checking things off, are you even enjoying this? And so it's been more about reeling it in and saying, okay, what are some layers that I can just remove here? So it has been a very wide range. And honestly, for many women, it's been propelling into things. And for others, it's been, all right, let's reel it in so we can actually reevaluate and go in a different direction.
Like
But
a spiritual
ultimately,
mama, just, resetting people. And I think, I think it's so important that we have, because it's sometimes, our circle of friends, our family, it's the lenses get a bit skewed. You need fresh eyes to really help see yourself and see new possibilities and all of those things. Some of your, like when doing the course with you, there was, oh my gosh, like each video was full of wisdom. Sometimes it can be really hard to retain. And I know, we need to go back and watch and all of those, but certain things just like stuck with me. One of them was the 10-minute task, and just the concept of having buckets and how many buckets, and that you can't have all the buckets full. Like visuals like that really helped me. Have you got some little things that you live by or that you tell all of your women? Just a few, some psychology things that can really help us help us think about our pathways in our brain, how to, because some of us think that we can't always be like that. It's, you've had words spoken over you and you're just going to stay like that. What's like a little tips and tricks Huguette bundle that you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing I want to share is really understanding the role and the importance of slowing down. Now, I know that this is almost like a bad word in modern day culture because everything's about hustling and doing and more and striving and, all this. It really, it's hustle culture, what we live in right now. And so I think what most people following that don't understand are, again, the neuro aspects of, and as you know, I incorporate so much neuroscience into what I teach, right? Because it really helps us understand how we're designed, and it pretty much proves everything God says about us and why he tells us to live a certain way. It's really for our own benefit. So when you really think about it, as you know, there's the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And when we are in this fight or flight mode, when we are on constant anxiety and checking emails and busyness and thinking about all these different kinds of things, then one of our systems is activated and the other one is deactivated. So the one that's activated is that fight or flight. It's the one, I'm running away from a cheetah, so I need to survive. And so you have this stress hormone going all throughout your body and your brain. Therefore, never you cannot be in that mode and also in a creative, spiritual, receptive, downloadable kind of state. And so this is why I like to emphasize that it is non-negotiable. If you are a creative entrepreneur, if you are a parent, if you are an artist of any kind, if you are someone trying to start any kind of business, even if it's not creative, right? If there's anything that you are trying to do outside of just living, putting out fires and living on urgency mode, then you're going to have to inevitably access slow living and pockets of slowness throughout your life. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's going to be calm and you're going to be listening to Sade all day. But what that means is you have to find pockets of time in your day and your life where you allow yourself to slow down and to really deactivate your sympathetic system and activate your parasympathetic, which is where you're able to really learn to be receptive to anything spiritual that you're wanting to receive, to creativity, to creation of any kind. And so that's the first thing. That's the first step. So I want most people listening to understand and recognize that it is literally impossible to create anything when you are living in putting out fires, in fight or flight mode, in anxiety mode, right? It's very natural for us to be nurturers on so many levels, to our partners, to our kids, to our parents, to our family members. And that's just a very beautiful part of who we are. But I think we also need to recognize that there is nothing more selfless than self-care, right? Because actually, when we think about somebody who's like addicted to some kind of substance, right? Like a drug addict or anything like that, or an alcoholic, we automatically assume, oh my gosh, poor guy, poor person, like they're suffering. There's actually nothing more selfish than being in a pattern of addiction, because it is all about that person and soothing that person's needs. Versus if we recognize that tending to our needs, being healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, relationally, there is nothing more edifying we could do for everyone who surrounds us than to be healthy ourselves. And so the rule of thumb is to create ratios within each season of your life. So this is what I mean by that. If you are someone who is really needing to heal a lot, but you're still needing to give to others, you need to recognize what is your ratio of feeding yourself and then pouring out into others. So maybe this is a season where your ratio is 80% you, 20% others. Right? Maybe you're in a season where you feel really balanced and really great. And you're like, okay, I'm kind of getting the hang of this. Maybe it's 50% you, 50% others. Maybe you're in a season where you've got most of these habits that you wanted to build. You feel really fulfilled. You feel very content. So maybe it's like 10% you, 20% you, 80% other people. And so understanding that ratio based on the season that you're at in life, similar to understanding the buckets in the different life chapters and seasons you're at, that is part of the balance. So it doesn't make you any more or less selfish in any season to take a little bit more than you are giving, but it's just recognizing that fraction, and that fraction or that ratio is going to change and vary based on the seasons you're in and how well you are stewarding yourself. That makes sense?
It's so helpful, because I think when you start to see it as a ratio, it means there's a capacity and a limit. And I think we often just go, oh yeah, I'm on a healing journey, but nothing else changes around me. And then you don't get your healing, or you don't push through, you don't have a breakthrough, because you cannot. We aren't designed to do it all, but culture would tell us that we should do it all. Recognizing that there is a limit on the capacity. I think that's a really good reminder for everybody. We are going to run out of time, and I just want to state the obvious, that you look so amazing and so colourful, and that is such a huge part of your expression. Can you talk to us a little bit about your love of colour? And yes. I'm going to guess that that's a Farm Rio piece right now.
Yes, it is.
Tell us, what are the labels that you're wearing? What are you loving?
Yeah. So, I'm actually not huge on labels. I've never been, but this is just one brand that has just stole my heart since day one. Yes, it's Farm Rio. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it's based in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, and just the most beautiful, colorful, fun prints, but also just soft fabrics that just feel yummy. They're very silky, very delicious. They also have stuff for the winter. They have for everything, but it's just lively and colorful all the time. But, to be honest, I've really been feeling, because of this same heartbeat of, how can I do everything with love? How can I perceive and touch everything that I want to be part of in my life with a sense of love, even the parts that feel more superficial, quote unquote. And I've realized that even within the superficial spheres, it's just doing things with love. And so what does that mean in the fashion world, in the fashion nook of my life? Well, it means that I want to support brands and businesses that are mindful, that are conscious, and that are also loving to people and to the environment. And so when I think about brands that I love, I think about brands that are sustainable, that it's fair trade, it's ethical, the way that they do their things, that they use the ethical fabrics, that they're not, abusing the environment in any way. And I also really love secondhand. I love thrift shopping and vintage shopping. I mean, what's more sustainable than that, right? So there really is no limit. It does take some restraints, because fast fashion still creates massively beautiful things, and it's really easy to just be like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, it's so cheap. But I think one of the things that I've just really wrapped my head around is that it's really not just about being ethical and being extra holy and doing things a certain way. It's about how can I love through everything that I do. It's how can I love through all the votes that I give in my life, because every time you spend $1 or any, whatever your currency is anywhere in the world that you're watching this, it's every dollar is your vote towards something. It's your vote towards loving something and caring about something, or kind of bypassing it or ignoring it. So I think for me, it's just come down to that. So how can I love in every way? So I think about that when it comes to food, when it comes to clothing, accessories. Am I perfect? Is everything I own completely ethical, sustainable? Probably not. It's not like that's my primary agenda in every single thing that I consume, but I try to really be as careful with that as possible.
You're so intentional, and it shows. And it's, have you got any secret projects, anything major, any exciting creative projects in the works? We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yes. So I have a few projects in heart and some at work. So I'm currently preparing a proposal for a potential devotional book that's going to have sort of this beautiful aesthetic. It's not just going to be soul food, but it's also going to be eye food. So I love that combination of things that are internal and also externally delicious. So kind of with a magazine aesthetic, but a devotional where we can, go through every day and have something to read. Because I've recognized that's one of the needs for many women is like, where do I read? How do I even start? If I want to have like daily time to myself, how do I do that? What do I read? And so I figured, why not just comprise a devotional that would help women start in that process. So that is one of the most exciting. Yes.
Beautiful. We need to end now, but thank you so much for taking the time. Is little Zoe about to wake up?
She's with my mom today because I was going to do the call. So I was like, you know what? I need a little bit of mental time and mental space.
Well, I'm so grateful, and I'm sure that everyone has absolutely loved your little pearls of wisdom, and we will chat soon.
Yes, we will. Thank you for having me. Love you.